believe how this ended, and I don't need you to. I'm writing this because the hollow behind my town still holds its breath the way it did the night I heard it whistle back. My name is Daniel, 33, born in Southwest Virginia. The kind of place where you can read the seasons by the creek depth and tell the time by the katydids. I hunt, I fish, I carry a first aid kit and a coil of paracord without thinking about it. I was raised to respect the woods. Leave gates how you found them. Don't step on fresh moss. Listen more than you talk. People from away say the Appalachians are quiet. They're not. They're chatty, stream on stones, owls trading gossip, foxes barking like mean dogs, until all of it shuts off at once. That shutdown is a verdict. If you've never felt an entire ridge decide you're unwelcome, you won't like this story. I learned that August how a valley can go still, and then fill the new space with something that isn't wind, and how a Fayum person can become a root instead of a visitor. That's the intro you asked for. Here's the night. I got off work late and decided to cut through Whitaker Hollow, an old logging road that saves 15 minutes if you know the washouts. Fog sat low like a spill. Gravel pinged the undercarriage and peppered the silence in a way that made me feel louder than I was. Halfway down the grade, I heard 3 clean notes as if a referee were somewhere in the rhododendron. High, lower, high. Sharp enough to feel cut into the air. I'll admit my first thought was a kid messing around. Then the notes came again, but from my right, close to the glass, so close they sounded like they were in the cab. I rolled the window up and told myself to stop making radio out of wind. When the road straightened, I saw a pale flash nailed to a tulip poplar. I braked, and the fog rolled past as if it didn't care I'd stopped. A child's sneaker hung there by twine, heel black with creek mud, toe chewed up from a drag. You're supposed to photograph things like that and call someone. I took a picture, put the truck in park, and the woods turned its head away from me. I can't say it any other way. The katydids and peepers cut, the creek held its breath, and from behind me, the 3 notes sounded again. Softer, as if whoever did it was in a different room. I turned my phone to video and walked the ditch with my flashlight low like a cop. The beam found circles of stones at the base of 2 sycamores, 12 rocks in each ring, chalky white, dust fresh on the leaves. The chalk wasn't store chalk. It was scraped rock, that greasy squeak powder that clings to your skin. Something had scored lines between the circles into the dirt, 2 narrow lanes that ran from tree to tree and then disappeared into fern. It looked like a track for a toy, only too careful, too straight, too much like someone had measured with their own feet. The whistle came again, farther up the hollow, and my video picked it like a clean recording with no echo. I said hello, like an idiot, and immediately wished I hadn't, because another hello answered, not echoed, slower, deliberate, syllables pulled thin like warm taffy. Low. I drive a manual, and my clutch foot trembled when I slipped the truck back in gear. The grade past the poplar is hairpins and blind culverts. I took them too fast, then too slow, trying to make the sound come from someplace ordinary. Every time the notes came, birds reset, as if a hand had flipped a switch. It took me a beat too long to notice I was seeing blaze marks where no trail has ever been. Fresh gray slashes on tree trunks, not paint, something rubbed into the grain. They weren't where a human would put them to be helpful. They were at knee height, Shoulder height, too many. A shepherd's tally. A doe burst out in front of me and hit the bank without looking, not running from me, running from being between me and something else. When I made the bottom, the road should have spat me by the church picnic shelter. Instead, the fog opened on a clearing I didn't know, and sitting there like a memory I hadn't had yet was an old fire tower. We have 3 in the county, 2 collapsed, and 1 fenced. This wasn't any of them. It stood with its legs drunk and its stairs half listing, and the steel had a skin like old pennies. My headlights found a sign staked in the scrub. Keep off, condemned county. But the county seal was wrong. The bear drawn like a child had traced it. I should have reversed, but service sometimes happens 10 feet higher, and I wanted another human voice more than I wanted to be wise. I took a flashlight and climbed. The metal complained the way old barns do in wind, flexing first one way, then the other. At the second flight, a smell rolled over me. Wet iron, and something sweet like rot in a tin. I've helped dress deer. It wasn't that. It was older, cellar deep. The whistle lifted again, and this time it didn't come from the trees. It came from above me, from the platform. I ducked back against the stringer and pointed my light up the center. The beam struck nothing, and then too much. A shape leaning over the lip with arms too long for a man, elbows pointed the wrong way, hands resting palm down on the metal like it enjoyed how it felt. Where a face should be was skin stretched plain, pulsing with the breathe in 3, breathe out 1 rhythm I'd been counting without meaning to. It dipped its head as if to learn the angle of me, and then slid backward with a patience I didn't earn. I took the stairs down wrong, hitting every 3rd tread and the landings with the side of my boot. I jumped the last 6 and rolled. Gravel went down my shirt and ate at my back like ants. I got the truck around with a 3-point I couldn't. Duplicate sober. When I looked in the mirror, the tower leaned a degree it hadn't before, not falling, listening. Halfway to pavement, a glow moved along beside me through the trees like an animal pacing a fence. It wasn't eyeshine. It had the quality of a lantern under a sheet. I topped the grade and finally hit the hardtop by the church like I should have, an hour earlier. The fog ended there as hard as a door. There were tire tracks in the lot that weren't mine. 2 circles side by side, tight like someone had paced with a cart. Chalk dust sat in the gravel in half moons. I drove home with the window down despite the wet and tried to breathe my heartbeat into something smaller. I showered with the light on. I slept on the couch with boots on. In the morning, I went back, with daylight and a stupid kind of courage. There was no tower. I don't mean it was farther than I'd thought, or hidden by a different angle. I mean the clearing wasn't there, and the road ran as it always has towards the picnic shelter. The poplar had no shoe. The bark was unscarred, but on the guardrail by the church, someone had rubbed a grey mark the height of my thigh, a long smear with finger gaps where a hand had been. It came off on my thumb like rain-soft chalk that would rather be on skin. I told old men at the hardware. They smiled like somebody telling me how to fix a carb I don't own. One said, "They whistle to map you," and the others found things to look at. I don't use Whitaker after dark now. I don't follow fresh blazes if I don't know the hand that made them. And sometimes the house goes quiet all at once. Fridge. Dog snore. My own breath. and 3 notes thread the air from nowhere, soft as permission. I don't answer. If you hear that pattern in a hollow, don't answer either. The woods out here aren't haunted. They're occupied. I keep the photo of that shoe on my phone and I won't show it to anyone. Folks who don't live here hear Appalachia and picture postcard ridgelines and porches with mason jars of tea. The part they don't see is how a road can curl along a ravine like a question you shouldn't answer. I spent 3 years running a tandem dump for a quarry outside Beckley, mostly night hauls to avoid school buses and tourists. The run I hated ran through a slot the old-timers still call Black Rock Gorge, a place the radio loses its nerve and the cliffs crowd your mirrors until your breath has to ask permission. First time I went through, the lead man on the CB said, "Stay center, don't stop for lights that aren't headlights," which I wrote off as local color until the night the gorge answered back. It started like weather no app would own. A low pressure headache that reached across the windshield and pressed the cab flat. I was 20 minutes out, engine pulling in fourth, when the air in front of the truck bled from clear to a red so thin I wanted to call it dust until it moved, like breath. I've driven through smoke and fog. Smoke has taste and fog has weight. This had neither. It came in through the vents even with recirc on, and the cab smelled like pennies warming on a stove. I cracked the window to prove a point to myself, and the sound went strange. My engine fell 2 rooms away, and the gorge started humming a single note just below where a song would begin. I know roads. This was not a road sound. Then the first handprint slid down the inside of my windshield. It wasn't theatrical, no dripping blood, no movie claw marks, just a palm the size of mine, print lines too long, pressed with deliberate pressure from the side I was breathing. Another followed, angled like a child testing a window. Then a third that left a ghost of dew where skin hadn't been a second before. I said a curse out loud, because talking makes something yours. The radio clicked alive with no call sign. 2 short whistles, and a long, like somebody halfway through teaching a bird a trick. "Knock it off," I told a gorge that doesn't care about my opinions, and put my foot down harder than the grade liked. The red thinned, then thickened as if my movement stirred it. My headlights bounced off the cliff and back into me, washing. The cab pink. That's when the brake lights bloomed ahead, 3 in a row around a blind bend where no turnout exists. I had 2 options: trust them or trust the rule I was given. I rode the center line like a prayer bead and threaded the space between the first set and the wall with 6 inches to forgive me. Up close, the lights were plastic lanterns taped to garden stakes. Their lenses smeared with something to make them look right until you were too committed. The second vehicle was a flatbed with no axles propped on cribbing to make a shadow, and the third was nothing but a reflection panel stapled to plywood. The gorge makes echoes even in the dark. The setup counted on that. Halfway past the last fake break, I saw the real problem. 2 men in coveralls at the lip of a gravel turnout I'd never noticed. One holding a hand up in that patient highway wave that says tire, paperwork, pallet shift, pick your lie. I didn't stop. I swung. wide enough to make the tandem complain, and watched the man's hand flatten into something that didn't wave. He didn't step back. He stepped forward into my mirror, like he wanted me to know his shape. The red pressed harder. The hum rose until the rear view rattled. Through it, I watched them walk into the road with a kind of calm. You only learn when you're sure you get to decide what happens next. The gorge pinched, the radio spat static like oil on a pan, and the cab temperature dropped the way rooms do before a refrigerator dies. That's when the prints on the glass moved. I don't mean more appeared. I mean the first 3 smeared. Toward me like someone on the hood wanted in, then dragged a finger down until it squealed a line that set my molars on edge. I reached for the hazards, then thought about giving anyone anything they'd asked for, and kept both hands where belief. Stays, 10 and 2. The hum shifted, finally found the note it liked, and the plastic lanterns ahead went dead in a neat line like a fuse blew. In that breath of darkness, a shape took the road just past my bumper. Tall, jointed wrong, nothing theatrical, only the suggestion of limbs that forgot how far joints should bend. And then it wasn't there. I've told this part 3 ways, to 3 people, and every time I hear how it sounds. It crossed the lane the way heat ripples cross a hood. Not a body, a decision. The red drew in toward it like dust to a magnet. I crested the last rise, and the gorge let go, the way a hand lets go of a collar. My ears popped. Headlights behind me went from 2 to none like a switch, and the CB came back with the lead man asking if I'd seen the decoration. I said I'd seen bad art and worse choices. He didn't laugh. "Don't stop for anyone in there," he said. "Don't even stop for yourself." At the scale house in Pax, I pulled under the sodium lamps and checked the glass. Dry, clean. No streaks, no oil slick hand maps. The inside of the windshield felt warmer than the air, as if it had been touched long enough to take a print, and then asked to forget it. I didn't tell dispatch because what was I going to say? Men with fake brake lights and a gorge that plays organ. The next week, a company truck didn't check in. They found it idling 3 miles past the turnout trailer. Empty. Cab door open into brush that didn't keep a footprint. Maybe thieves got bold. Maybe the gorge kept something that liked humming. I took a different route after that, even if it cost time. A guy at the diner showed me a phone pic he swore was real. Red fog on the cliffs, like lichens lit from inside. I quit that run at the end of the season, changed to gravel locals, thought some distances should stay longer. On my last night through Black Rock, I drove with the window cracked enough to taste cold. Halfway in, when the radio died, I whistled 2 short and 1 long into the dark just to see if there were only men waiting. Something 100 feet up answered with the same pattern in a voice that wasn't wind. A week later, I went back at noon with a coworker so I could pretend I was pointing out geology. The turnout was there, smaller than the night makes it, scarred by skids that didn't belong to any truck I know. On the shoulder, I found limestone powder in a circle and a Huey's half moon on my own sidewall I swear hadn't been there leaving the yard. He called it nothing. Inspection chalk. Kids. Up under the guard, I found a quarter-size black disc with a magnet and a dead LED. We split it open on the tailgate. Cheap board, bad solder. He flicked it into the ditch like that solved something. The rest of the week I drove like I was carrying a sleeping kid. Every reflector looked like an eye. One afternoon, a maintenance pickup sat with cones perfect and a vest waving me to the shoulder. The door logo was the right color in the wrong font. I took the middle anyway. That night the gorge was clean. No red, no hands, but the hum came from the stone at knee level, as if the cliff was talking to itself. Later at Dotson's, a trooper who knows my aunt stirred his coffee and said, "There's always somebody practicing authority. If you feel pushed to stop, pick cameras and other people's boredom. The gorge is older than warnings. I keep the center now and let the mountain be rude. If the road asks you to be part of a picture, don't. Get past the frame." Last thing. Months later, a rookie took the gorge after midnight and said he heard brake lights before he saw them. He meant it. Some sounds are pictures here. If the air turns red, don't breathe the story. It's trying to tell you. If you want the short version, here it is. I followed a creek I knew into a hollow I didn't, and it gave something back I hadn't lost yet. The long version is the one that keeps me up. I'm Caleb, 30, born in eastern Kentucky, and my church is a yellow-blazed trail, a thermos, and whatever the ridge wants to show me. I know better than to hike alone at dusk, but March makes a man cocky. No bugs, no snakes, deadfall you can read like a book. I parked at the end of a county road and took a fisherman's path along Stoneboy Creek, figuring I'd loop up to an old bench cut and out before full dark. The water was spring cold and glassy over slate, the kind that looks shallow until it tricks your ankle. 3 turns in, the valley pinched, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees as if I'd stepped inside a refrigerator. The creek voice went from chatter to whisper, and then to nothing. That nothing wasn't quiet. It was a held note I felt in my fillings. I turned to go back the way I came, and the path behind me had shifted. Same rocks, same route ladder, but arranged like a close cousin trying on my family's face. I don't spook easy, and I didn't then. I marked a rock with a grease pencil, tucked a twig in the bank like an arrow, and walked on. 20 yards later, the arrow was in front of me, wet and fresh. I tasted metal. I told the creek out loud that I got the hint. And that's when it laid the first thing at my boot. A license plate from Ohio, mud clean where hands had wiped, edges bent like teeth had worried it. I don't collect trash, but leaving it there felt like refusing a gift in a house you want to leave. So I slid it into my pack. The note under my ribs got louder. The next bend opened on a pool where a logjam had made a black mirror. In the mirror, a gray shape hovered above me where the open sky should be. And when I looked up, all I saw were sycamore limbs, knuckled together like old fingers. In the mirror, the shape drifted closer. I stepped back, and the mirror changed. My shoulders. In it stayed forward. The pool burped. A camera banged the stones at my feet. A cheap digital, screen spidered, lens cracked. The SD card was taped over with a bandage like a kid's idea of security. I didn't open it. I kept walking because men make jobs out of leaving places. Politely. The creek gave me a child's sock next, white gone to tea, and a penny so polished it looked wet. I don't care to catalog everything it put there. It's enough to say none of it belonged to spring runoff. I've worked flood cleanups. Water keeps what it can carry. This was curated. Past the pool, the rock turned to ledge and the trail to choices without right answers. I picked the left on principle and found a set of stone steps tucked into fern, too even to be natural, too narrow for any foot I'd call human. Each riser had a shallow crescent worn into it, as if somebody had dragged a heavy bowl up and down for years. On the 5th step, I realized the crescents were wet. On the 6th, my boot slid on a clear smear that smelled like the inside of a well. I touched it with one finger and learned that it wasn't water. It moved toward heat. I wiped it on moss that went pale where it took, and kept my hands in fists after that so my knuckles could tell me if the air changed. At the top, the bench. Cut looked like it should. Flat slot, hemlock guard. Good place for a fire if you're not worried about spark. Except there was a fire, and no one tending it. Coals under ash, heat that shimmered. A ring too clean. Above the ring, 3 sticks. Lashed into a figure I won't name, because I don't need anything hearing me use its name. Somebody had hung a strip of cloth from its arm, red once and not from dye. I took a step back and my heel kissed something round. A glass jar stood half buried behind me. Inside, a bundle of hair, light brown like a boy's, cut from behind his ear. A twist of paper with writing blurred by damp, and a loop of dirt-stained string. I'm not brave. I picked up the jar and put it in my pack, because some parts of the mountains read like court, and when you find evidence, you bring it to a person who knows how to end a thing. That was my theory. The bench cut didn't care. The note at my teeth became a hum with words my head didn't translate. I backed out the way I came, and the steps were gone. Fern had pulled in like fists. I took the slope on my side, hands and knees, slate barking my shins, and slide-stepped until my boots hit the creek. The water was moving wrong, upstream in a thin skin over the top, while the body went the right way underneath. In that thin skin, small things rode past against the current. Beads, coins, a zip tie, the corner of a photograph. I saw my own face in the film of it, but younger, but also older, like the water didn't care about tenses. Behind me, at the edge of the trees, a figure stood with feet in the leaves and a head under the hemlocks, parts arranged like someone had read the word man and guessed. Its outline took the shape of whatever it stood in front of, not transparency, obedience. It raised one arm, and the jar in my pack shifted with a soft clink like approval. The creek laid another thing at my boot, a key on a red tag stamped 12. I know the Red Mesa off 66 has a 12. I know because a driver told me not to take it. I didn't take the key. I told the figure I was leaving what wasn't mine, and the figure tilted in a way that said I'd used a correct form. I walked without turning my back, and the path behind. Me unbraided a little at a time, just enough to let me keep the idea that I chose it. When the truck came into view, I was not surprised to find a half moon of chalk on my tire, because it shows up where stories get written, and the mountains tell their own. I left the jar at the sheriff's office with a note that said, "Found at Stoneboy." A deputy called a week later to ask me if I still had it. I told him I left it on the counter in plain sight. He told me he believed me because the locker they keep that sort of thing in had a jar with my note, but no jar inside, only a ring of damp on the shelf. I walked Stoneboy once more, in company with 2 volunteers and a ranger who spends his life counting salamanders. We found the pool. We did not find steps, or bench cut, or fire ring. We did find a path of coins half pressed into the mud in crescents the size of bowls. The ranger said there are old beliefs about paying the water, and then said it wasn't his job to list them. He did ask me if I'd brought anything else home by mistake. I said the creek had returned me a phone I would never turn on. He said if it starts recording on its own, wrap it in salt and leave it at the county line. You can laugh. I did too, until my porch light clicked twice the next week when the power wasn't out, and the recorded message on my cell was nothing but creek for 2 minutes straight. I live up the ridge now, and I don't take Stoneboy to save time. When I fish, I throw back more than I keep. If a stream gives you something, bring it to a person who knows how to end a thing, or place it where the road can forget it. Don't pocket it because you like souvenirs. The hollow out here is not haunted. It's curated. It will lend you what it wants you to return, and if you keep it, it will come check your shelves. If you hear the note under your teeth, swallow your name and go. The creek knows it without help. Months later, a flood tore through 3 counties, and the news ran footage of refrigerators bobbing like buoys. After the water fell back, I walked a legal stretch with a church group to haul trash. In a tangle of roots, the creek had combed like hair. I found a key tag the same red as before, with a 12 stamped crooked. No key, just the tag. I didn't touch it. A boy from the group bent for it and slipped. The water papped his palm once like a mother slapping a curious hand. He cried without embarrassment and said it felt like a mouth. That night, the deputy texted from a number. That doesn't accept replies. Jar turned up in lost and found at the library with no card, contents missing, lid threaded with creekweed. I wrote back anyway and told him I was moving my route. He sent a thumbs up that didn't belong on a thing like this. You can believe what you want. I keep my boots outside now, and I don't bring river rock home for the mantle because a cousin of mine did, and the clock in her hallway started keeping 2 times at once. If Stoneboy wants to return something, I let the county handle signatures. If it ever lays your name at your feet, step around it. Names sink different here.